Welcome to Stories Room. Enjoy listening and don't forget to subscribe. I never suspected my life could flip so drastically, going from a calm, predictable flow into a turbulent sea of deception, passion, and jealousy. My marriage to Michael always seemed to me the epitome of stability. We met back in college. I was an 18-year-old freshman who'd just arrived in a bustling metropolis, and he was a determined upperclassman whose seriousness and confidence impressed me. In the 8 years we'd been together, we'd seen plenty of hardships, but until recently, I was convinced we made an unbreakable team. That confidence crumbled in an instant when I stumbled upon a shared email account we used for household matters. I'd assumed I'd see nothing but the usual notifications and discount offers, but one new sender caught my eye: Club Eden Dark. At first, I thought it might be spam, but I opened the message and felt my heart pounding against my ribs, as if it were about to jump out of my chest. The email was a list of precautions and strict rules for attending special parties. Seeing that it was addressed to Michael, I was stunned. He'd never mentioned this club to me. My curiosity flared. Unsure if it was right, I started reading. The deeper I got, the more I felt the ground slipping from under my feet. It turned out Michael was an active participant in this private community, which focused on BDSM and all sorts of roleplay. Judging by the dates of these emails, this had been going on for months. The messages contained references to other people. Some names popped up frequently: Jessica, Thomas, Kira, but one appeared more often than the rest: someone named Diana. And the more I read, the clearer it became that their connection went far beyond a casual, kinky chat. Tears filled my eyes. Had we been living like strangers all this time, with me oblivious to his secret life? My hands shook as I scrolled through those messages, raw anger and pain tangling in my chest. Each new email I opened made me feel as though I were sinking further into a bottomless pit. Worse than the fact he was attending private gatherings was seeing how deeply emotional these exchanges were. Michael shared dreams, fears, and fantasies with Diana, things I thought only we shared. I felt utterly betrayed, not so much by the physical aspect as by the profound deception. He'd been lying to me, and by extension, to our marriage. That evening, when Michael came home from work, I sat in our living room with a single lamp on, staring at the wall. My head was storming with questions I had no answers to. He walked in, smiling as usual, then noticed my tense posture. "Sophia, is everything all right?" he asked, concerned. I hesitated, not sure how to begin. My throat clenched. I could barely breathe. I stood up and, as though afraid of his touch, took a step back, letting him feel the cold emptiness between us. "I have a question," I said, trying to hide the trembling in my voice. "What do you know about Club Eden Dark?" Michael's face went pale. His eyes darted sideways, as if he were desperately trying to invent a justification. But the first reaction is always the most revealing. I saw fear. "Where did you see that?" he asked in a hushed tone, lowering his head. I pulled out my phone with the open correspondence. He instantly understood I'd uncovered what he could no longer conceal. He stumbled into stammered excuses, claiming he was just curious, it was work-related, a friend invited me, and so on. But the moment he spoke, an internal thunder roared. These excuses were meaningless. "Just curious?" I repeated bitterly. "You and Diana have been mapping out plans and discussing things you've never even mentioned to me. Michael, this isn't some one-time experiment. You're living this life without me." He fell silent for a moment, which felt endless to me. And then I realized he wasn't even going to deny his guilt. He looked remorseful, but in his eyes, I saw a strange mixture of shame and relief. Maybe he was tired of hiding. "I'm sorry," he whispered. I just couldn't figure out how to tell you." Anger sparked in me, coiled tight with hurt. Part of me wanted to scream at him, throw something heavy, rage about how thoroughly he'd destroyed our trust. But all I could do was stand there and tremble in the awful silence. "Why?" I asked at last. "Why not just talk to me? Maybe I would have understood. But now?" How do we fix this bottomless deception? He tried to come closer, but I wouldn't let him. I couldn't stand to look at him right then. My chest was a swirling mix of grief, humiliation, and seething fury. Over the next several days, I moved like a machine on autopilot. Michael scarcely spoke. He slept in the guest room, while I either worked late or stayed at a friend's place. I kept wondering how he'd managed to lead a double life for so long. Every time I remembered his messages to Diana, I felt paralyzed. The most humiliating part was realizing my husband was sharing the kind of intimate thoughts and emotions with a stranger that I believed were reserved for us. Diana's letters to him were long, suggestive. In one, she described how she couldn't wait for their next session, how his dominance thrilled her, how she was excited by their secret. Rather than stopping her or explaining he had a wife, he replied with things like, "I miss your touch," and "I can't wait to be in your arms again." Reading that, I felt crushed, not just by jealousy, but by the realization that he was using me as a facade. I knew I needed to make a decision, try to save our marriage if that was even possible, or end it before it drove me mad. But my pain-fueled mind whispered a third option: vengeance. I found myself fantasizing about how I could make him regret what he'd done. I'd always been a calm, logical person. I'd never sought revenge or wanted to harm anyone. But now, the hurt revealed sides of me I never expected. Lying in bed at night, I pictured ways to make Michael feel the agony of betrayal firsthand. Before I could act on any vengeful plan, I had to straighten myself out. I want to see a therapist. Sitting there, I wept bitterly, describing Michael's double life. She helped me articulate my feelings: resentment, anger, humiliation, fear. She asked what I truly wanted. I realized that what I wanted most was to regain my sense of autonomy, to feel I had real choices. After a few sessions, I could breathe again. I realized that even if I decided to get revenge, it shouldn't make me sink to his level. It had to be a deliberate choice, not just blind outbursts born of hatred. Gradually, a plan formed in my mind. I noticed in Michael's and Diana's emails that they had a big underground party coming up in a couple of weeks. They were discussing the venue, the guests, and the games they might play. Diana mentioned a few other participants, names I'd seen in his messages: Jessica, Thomas. Suddenly, I had a thought. What if I showed up myself, under an alias, as a new participant? I reached out to a friend, Abby, who knew a thing or two about extreme nightlife and was aware of certain clubs where people test boundaries. I didn't tell her the whole truth, just said I needed to get into a private party that had strict rules. Abby knew someone who could issue an invitation. It felt a bit like diving into some shady side of life, but my determination overpowered my fear. I created a new persona, Laura, a woman returning from Europe looking for new experiences. To make it real, I set up an entirely separate email and messenger profile, describing myself as open to experimentation and ready for any role. To my surprise, I felt a strange rush, like an undercover agent entering a secret world. After a tense week of preparation, I secured a virtual pass to the upcoming event where everyone from that group, Michael and Diana included, would gather. My goal was clear: to see firsthand what took place behind the scenes and confront them if I got the chance. On the day of the party, I chose a bold outfit: a tight black dress, lace-up boots, and a light cloak to keep me incognito on the way. My whole body hummed with tension, a mix of fear, adrenaline, and a fierce resolve to see this through. I knew I was taking a risk. If Michael recognized me, a huge scandal could erupt. But I was ready. The event took place at a rented house in a quiet suburb. The front yard looked ordinary, neat pathways and warm lights in the windows. Yet once I slipped through the front gate, I sensed a different atmosphere. Half darkness, provocative music, pungent perfumes, and the electric thrill of secrets. A broad-shouldered man named Thomas greeted me, gave me a polite smile, and checked the pass on my phone before letting me in. "You're new, right?" he asked, eyeing me up and down. "Laura." I just nodded. My biggest hope was that no one would recognize me, because in this dim light, with heavy makeup and a wig, I looked like a different woman. My pulse throbbed in my ears. Inside, the lights were low, black drapes hung along the walls, and there were couches scattered everywhere. People in latex or other revealing outfits lounged in corners. Some were smoking hookahs, others were talking in hushed voices. Soft laughter and the sound of whips brushing against walls filled the air. I walked on, trying not to attract too much attention. Waitstaff were passing around drinks and snacks. Through a half-open door, I glimpsed a playroom, moans, laughter, instructions being whispered. The air was thick with sensual tension. As I made my way down a corridor, a tall woman glided past me in a leather corset and mask, with platinum blonde hair. By her voice and posture, I realized in horror it was Diana. She was laughing and chatting with another woman, glancing at her phone. My heart nearly stopped. Every nerve in my body tensed. My first impulse was to confront her outright, but I held back. Doing that here would have turned into a fiasco. Better to watch and wait. Diana walked on, evidently not noticing me. I overheard her mention Michael's name. He was supposed to arrive any moment. That gave me a spark of courage. I had a chance to get close to Diana as a newcomer, find out more about her, and maybe corner them both. I prepared myself, pulling a light mask over my eyes. I bought it specifically for anonymity. Then I headed to a lounge area where guests mingled over drinks. Thomas spotted me. "Join us, Laura," he said with a polite but almost theatrical air. "We're talking about boundaries. I'd love to know your preferences." "I'll come by in a moment," I replied. "Need a drink first to get my nerve up." He nodded understandingly. I grabbed a champagne flute and took a couple of sips. Suddenly, I felt someone studying me. Turning around, I saw Diana again. Minus her mask, she might have recognized me, but now, in the dim glow, I was just a stranger. "Are you new here?" she asked, looking me up and down. "I don't recall seeing you before." Her voice was gentle, but carried a ring of confidence, as though no boundaries existed for her. She gave off the sense she was used to testing people's limits. "Yes, I am," I said, feigning slight embarrassment. "Just arrived." "Excellent," Diana smiled. "New blood always adds a spark to our group. You'll like it here. I'm sure you'll find exactly what you're looking for." Her gaze lingered on me, intrigued. People who attend events like this usually have unspoken desires. In my case, that desire was to expose her and watch her reaction once she realized who I really was. For now, I was simply Laura, the mysterious newcomer. "What do you prefer?" she asked without any sign of shyness, taking a sip of her cocktail. "I'm looking for something special," I said, trying to sound cryptic. "I love experimentation, but haven't found the right partner yet." She gave a knowing smile. "Maybe you should consider some of our men," she suggested, "or women, if that's your style. We're open to whatever you like." A wild resolve flickered inside me at that moment. She had no idea she was speaking to the wife of her secret lover, and that thought gave me a dangerous thrill. We chatted a bit, and Diana suggested we move to a nearby room where people were engaging in more active play. My heart lurched, knowing I was about to witness firsthand the world I'd only read about in Michael's emails. But I had to see it, no matter how painful. In that half-hidden space, a few couches lined the walls, along with some specialized furniture where couples or small groups were already involved in role-play. Low lights cast theatrical shadows. I saw a man kneeling before a woman in a latex suit, and a woman biting her lip as her partner teased her legs with a whip. The air filled with murmurs and quiet moans, adding to the charged atmosphere. Diana surveyed the room like a hostess of the ball, then sat on an empty couch, motioning me to join her. My nerves tightened with every step. I'd never been in a place so openly sexual and intense. Then Diana's focus shifted to the door. I realized Michael had just walked in. He wore a half mask, dressed in a partially unbuttoned black shirt. He looked a bit tense, but was trying to appear confident. My heart hammered in my throat. "Hey," Diana said, beckoning him closer. Just like I said, tonight's special. He walked forward. His gaze flicked over me. But to my relief, there was no hint of recognition. I kept my head slightly bowed, praying my disguise was working. "This is Laura. She's new," Diana explained. "Maybe she'll be interested in your expertise." Michael gave a slight nod, striving for a suave demeanor. I watched him tighten his jaw. Was he anxious I might be someone who'd notice his wedding ring? Or was he simply excited about a new partner? "Pleasure to meet you, Laura," he said softly. "I hope you find what you came for." I held my breath, forcing myself to remain silent. Diana laughed and ran a hand along his shoulder, openly flaunting to me that she owned him. A wave of revulsion and jealousy washed through me. She gave a meaningful smile. "Perhaps we three should try something together." Not immediately, of course. I can see Laura's still warming up to the vibe. But later, once she's comfortable. I bit my lip, trying to keep from breaking character. The sheer humiliation, my rival inviting me to a menage a trois with my own husband, was outrageous. But I had to stay calm. My plan wasn't finished yet. After about half an hour in this charged environment, I felt my nerves fraying. A couple had begun a public spanking session, while onlookers observed with amused interest, and others were openly making love. In one corner, two men and a woman were laughing, mixing their conversation with flirtatious touches. Try not to draw attention. I stayed near the edge of the room. Michael and Diana moved to the refreshment bar. I heard their low voices but couldn't catch every word. I inched closer under the pretext of getting another cocktail, hoping to learn what he said about me in his second life. "Did you tell Sophia about us?" Diana asked in a hushed tone. I recognized my own name. "No," Michael replied curtly, "and I don't plan to. We're on the verge of breaking up, if you really want to know. She found out about the club, but doesn't know the details. I don't think there's any fixing us." Diana clicked her tongue sympathetically, though her eyes flashed with what looked like satisfaction. "If that's the case," she whispered, "it's for the best. I kept telling you to live the way you really want, without worrying about her. I never understood why you clung to that marriage." He stayed silent. I could see confusion on his face. Maybe he did feel remorse, but also a powerful urge to keep pursuing this shadowy lifestyle. I fought down a rising wave of nausea and fury, recalling when I used to think he was honest and caring. I returned to the couch, my head swirling. A fierce desire to confront them right there burned through me. I pictured myself taking Diana aside, revealing who I was, letting her feel the terror of that instant, and letting Michael realize I'd been listening all along. The anticipation of seeing their horror was almost intoxicating. Still, I decided to wait until they approached me again. Diana had shown an interest in pulling me into their circle. That was perfect. I let her make the suggestion, and then, right when she did, I'd unmask myself. Sure enough, soon after, Diana beckoned me over with a curl of her finger. I pretended to be hesitant and then approached them, locking eyes with both. Michael looked intrigued, evidently enjoying the attention of the new girl that Diana wanted to invite into their play. "So, are you ready to try something new, Laura?" Diana asked, her gaze roving over me. I narrowed my eyes slightly. "What exactly do you mean?" She smirked. "You could join us. We love sharing a partner. Believe me, it's a one-of-a-kind experience." Rage pounded in my veins. They were inviting me, his own wife, to a group liaison, thinking I was just a curious stranger. Slowly, I raised my hand to my face, took hold of the mask's edge, and lifted it away. Pulling off the mask, I breathed in the seconds of shocked silence. Michael stared at me, initial disbelief giving way to horror. Diana darted her gaze between us in confusion. "What the?" she began, but I spoke first. "Hello, Diana," I said, my voice quiet yet cold. "I hope me being here is a surprise for both of you." Michael's face drained of color, and he opened his mouth as if to speak, but no words came out. Diana looked flustered. "Wait," she stammered, but I cut her off. "You two are liars and traitors. I said loud enough for those nearby to hear. I hope you enjoy living with the consequences of what you've done. Calm down, Diana hissed, trying to preserve the event's decorum. Do you really want to make a scene in front of everyone? Why not? I shot back. You had your fun behind my back. Maybe this will be fun for you, too. Michael tried to grab my arm, but I yanked it away and, in full view of the crowd, slapped him across the face. A resonant smack that made onlookers gasp. Diana glanced around nervously. Listen, Michael began, but I didn't let him finish. All this time you hid your secrets, betraying me, taking up with Diana like I was some clueless fool. Great. Now everyone here knows exactly what you really are. A coward who can't be honest with his wife. Yet you trot off to your mistress, tail tucked. The words spilled out, unstoppable, after building up for days. I was causing a scandal, yes, but I no longer cared. I felt a bizarre sense of release. This was my way of stripping away the lies. Diana realized I wasn't bluffing. She stepped back, throwing Michael a look that said, "Handle this yourself," leaving him humiliated. I didn't care to remain, either. I whipped out my phone, snapped a couple of photos, purely on instinct, and then glared at my husband. "Our marriage is over," I told him. "Now I see how little you're truly worth." I dashed out of the house, ignoring Michael's shouts as he tried to follow. Outside, I tore off the wig and tossed it onto the grass, running blindly into the night. My heart pounded so wildly that I could barely hear anything else. I wasn't sure whether I felt triumphant or on the verge of collapsing into tears. Maybe both. But one thing was certain. There would be no going back to our old life. Later, I got into my car and drove down the dark highway with no music. My mind reeled with the thought that I had just annihilated whatever remained of our marriage. Yet amid the pain, I felt a grim satisfaction. At last, I had taken control. I forced our secrets into the open. Over the next week, Michael and I hardly spoke. He tried texting me a few times. "Please listen, we can discuss this calmly," but I ignored him. He even tried returning home, but I changed the locks, making it clear I wanted nothing to do with him until I decided on my next steps. You might assume that exposing them should have given me peace. But my anguish still lingered. I couldn't simply flip a switch and forget the 8 years we'd spent together. Part of me still missed the sound of his voice, the memories of our happier times. Then, as soon as I recalled him whispering with Diana, I felt a fresh wave of disgust. I visited an attorney to learn about divorce procedures. He walked me through the details of dividing assets and handling the paperwork. That brought it home. A marriage is about more than feelings. It's also a legal contract. I left his office determined not to let myself be manipulated. Maybe it wouldn't make me happy right away, but at least I'd be free. Meanwhile, Michael persisted. He tried calling my best friend, Sarah, begging for a chance to meet with me, saying he wanted to make things right. But how do you fix something that shattered so completely? All I wanted was for him to acknowledge his betrayal and let me move on. Eventually, I agreed to see him at a cafe near my office. He looked haggard and lost. I arrived, arms folded. He was fidgeting with a napkin, a sure sign of anxiety. "I know I'm a terrible person," he began. "I got carried away. Over time, it became an addiction. Sophia, I never wanted to lose you. Now I see it's probably too late to say this." I said nothing, scanning the face I once adored. Now all I saw was a stranger. "Why did you want to meet?" I asked coldly. He drew a breath. "To say I'm sorry, truly sorry, and to tell you that you never deserved any of this. Yes, it's cliché and doesn't undo the damage, but I need you to know, hurting you wasn't my aim." His eyes glistened. Maybe he was sincere, but all I felt was weariness. "Too little, too late. You should have thought of that before," I answered. "Back when Diana was stroking your ego in secluded club rooms, you might have remembered you had a wife and stopped. But you didn't." He nodded, conceding my point. Part of me wanted to scream in his face, but by now, even that rage felt drained. It was all pointless. "I filed for divorce," I said eventually. "The paperwork will be ready soon." He pressed his lips together, closing his eyes for a second as if steeling himself. "Understand. You should know I won't fight it. I'll split our property fairly if that's what you need." He paused before adding softly, "I'm sorry." Inside, something shifted, not pity but a sense of release. I stood up from the table. "Then I hope you learn to live with this. Goodbye, Michael." I turned and left him there with his guilt and a bruised ego. Over the next few months, the divorce process was more cumbersome than I'd hoped, but I pressed on. I got a new apartment on the outskirts of town, signed up for a gym membership, and spent more time with friends. Finally, I wasn't weighed down by deception or forced to pretend everything was fine. At work, changes were happening too. I got a promotion and started heading a small department. Initially, I immersed myself in the new responsibilities to distract from the past. There were times when memories of Michael still stung, recollections of his kindness or humor in our early days. But immediately I'd recall his betrayal and feel a surge of resolve. I kept seeing my therapist for months. It truly helped me rebuild boundaries. I learned to trust myself again, to see that my worth didn't hinge on any partner's validation. Strangely, the heartbreak forced me to re-examine my own sexuality and emotional needs. I realized I'd been holding back for years, worried about judgments or conflicts, an irony, given how he'd been living his secret life. Yes, it might sound paradoxical, but Michael's betrayal compelled me to explore what I genuinely desire, to speak up for my needs. I wouldn't be signing up for clubs like Eden Dark, but I would no longer be ashamed to express my longings or to say no. Unexpectedly, I found myself spending more time with one of our company's clients, Alex. Tall, intelligent, with a calm smile and a quick sense of humor. At first, it was just business calls and project meetings. Gradually, however, a warm fondness grew between us. I noticed how his gaze lingered on me a moment longer than necessary, how our phone chats occasionally veered into playful banter. After wrapping up a project one day, we decided to celebrate at a small restaurant. I wore a lovely dress. He showed up in a stylish blazer. I laughed freely that night, almost feeling like a young girl on her very first date. My heart beat in a gentle, happy rhythm, no longer weighed down by old pains. "You're extraordinary," Alex told me when we ended up alone with our wine glasses. "Strong, smart, but I sense there's a sadness behind your eyes at times." I nodded. "I went through a rough patch. I'm still dealing with it." He gave me a gentle smile. "I admire people who face their fears head on. And if you ever want to just talk or go for a walk, I'm here." For the first time in ages, I felt a comforting sense of trust. At the end of the evening, we shared a shy kiss outside the restaurant. The tenderness of that kiss made me want to cry from relief. Relief that I could still feel joy in something new, free from the lingering shadows of the past. My relationship with Alex progressed naturally. We confided in each other about our histories, attended art exhibits, tried romantic candlelit dinners. Eventually, I found the courage to tell him about Michael's betrayal, about the painful discovery of his second life. Alex listened quietly, not interrupting, and his expression showed deep empathy. "You're incredibly brave," he said once I finished. "Not everyone manages to walk away from a situation like that with their dignity intact." I gave a shaky smile. I'm not sure it was always dignified. I was mostly desperate to escape. "The point is, you're free now," Alex said softly, "and you're the one directing your own future." We kissed, and I felt a warmth rising inside me. No longer the bitter heat of outrage, but a gentle flame of renewal. For the first time in months, I surrendered to a new desire without fearing old comparisons or ghosts. About 6 months after that fateful night at the club, Michael and I wrapped up all the legal matters. He transferred me the part of our joint assets owed to me, which helped me settle into my new place. We crossed paths for the last time at the notary's office. He looked older, weary, carrying a hollow sadness in his gaze. "I hope you find happiness," he said quietly. "Truly, and I wish the same for you," I replied, wanting to end on a calm note. Walking away from that office, I felt the final weight of my past lift off my shoulders. Everything that bound us was now just memory, painful, but behind me. And I learned my lesson. Sometimes love is betrayed, but it doesn't mean you must hide away forever. If anything, it showed me my own resilience. Now I've been living with Alex for 3 months. We're not rushing into anything, just enjoying each day. I'm learning to trust again, to let my guard down. We talk for hours about our fears and hopes. We share both passion and genuine respect for each other's boundaries. Sometimes we try small role plays in bed. Nothing is hidden behind secrecy or guilt, only mutual enthusiasm and honesty. For the first time, I see how liberating and profound intimacy can be when both partners are truthful. No more nightmares about Michael's club or the clandestine cravings he pursued behind my back. Now I make my own choices and set my own pace, with a man who respects and adores me fully. When I look in the mirror, I'm no longer the fragile wife who trusted blindly. I'm a woman who's been through betrayal and come out stronger. I'm not ashamed of my desires. I'm proud I confronted my pain and kept my sense of self. I've learned to love life again, to travel, to appreciate what I have, and to dream about what lies ahead. Above all else, I've realized you can't force honesty on someone who chooses deception, but you can choose to step away from their lies and build your own bright future, free of pretense. And if I ever seek more daring experiences, I'll do it openly, without hurting anyone. Yes, people sometimes crave forbidden excitement, chasing fantasies. That's their right, so long as nobody is being deceived or damaged in the process. I'm determined never to let that happen to me again. Finally, as I finish recalling my story, I let out a sad smile, remembering that not so long ago I thought my life was over. But in truth, it was just beginning. My pain became my fuel. My outrage became the spark for my growth. I found my freedom from the shadows that held me down and discovered something infinitely more precious, the ability to love and be loved, all without losing myself. That's the end of our story. Make sure to subscribe to our channel to stay up to date on new stories and share this video so others can discover these great stories too.